Jack of all trades.
Hey, I'm your host, Lamar L.A. Smith, and welcome to another episode of the Jack of All Trades podcast. Today I'm with Joella Roberts, a DACA recipient from the beautiful Twin Islands known for Carnival and Calypso, Trinidad and Tobago, while completing her baccalaureate in business administration at the University of the District of Columbia. Joella, master's student organizing. She served as the first undocumented student, government vice president, president, and then selected as the student representative for the board of trustees at UDC.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
No problem, no problem. All right. So it's not even that funny of a story, but Joella and I actually know each other from high school. We went to high school together and we weren't super close, but one thing I can tell you, definitely someone that never was afraid of holding her tongue, definitely was very outspoken. And for all the people in DC that know, or people outside of DC that know about Jonan, the guys definitely did not want to join with her. Like you were asking for some problems if you were trying to join with her. That's all I'm gonna say about that one.
Put respect on my name. You have to. It's part of DC culture. You have
Yeah,
to.
you had to. You had to. It's a dog eat dog world out here in DC. So
Okay.
you had to. It's like protection, honestly.
Absolutely. Verbal protection.
Verbal protection. All right. Today we're going to talk about something that to me is not only important in college, but in life. But specifically, we're going to talk about diversity in college.
Mhm.
So you've accomplished a lot since we were at McKinley Tech, from co-founding Migration Matters to, just all the work that you're doing to make universities more diverse and specifically HBCUs and advocating for social and political change for Black people. I
Right.
think it's important that we start from the beginning. Like,
Mm.
how was your childhood?
So I grew up in America and Washington, D.C. specifically for the most part. But when I came to this country, I was undocumented just as the rest of my family, meaning that we did not have citizenship. And so with that being said, a lot of access and capabilities in this country is tied to citizenship, just as like economic mobility. So needless to say, we were poor. We were Black, predominantly women literally only women in my household, which means that gender pay gap, right? Not really having wealth. Thank gracious, we had a house, but I definitely lived right across the street from the hood with the rest of Black people. And so with that being said, I was still in Chocolate City when DC was Chocolate City. So I could walk down the street and grab my good girlfriend and walk to elementary school back in the day. But like now, things are much different. So growing up in DC, I definitely had to learn the culture because my family was not playing go-go, was not playing was not playing Aretha Franklin, was not playing all of this. A lot of history I had to learn on my own when it came to like American culture. So assimilating as an immigrant, not even first gen, but like the generation to come to this country was like extremely hard. Also being dark skinned, colorism, being bullied, having to learn how to fight, both girls and boys, like literally. And so in addition to like being really smart and being in like honors classes, AP classes, all of the things, but like still having an attitude, still like not being scared to speak, and then having that like honest criminality placed on me just because of who I am and what I look like. So I mean, there's a lot of things to be proud of because I love my city, I love my family, I love my upbringing, I love my friends. So I wouldn't say that I had like a terrible childhood or anything, but like all of the things that come along with being all that I am made it extremely hard. And so in an effort to make it so that people who look like me or people who have the similar background or people that don't, like in general, or not having people struggle through childhood, like and not having the rest of your life being unlearning childhood, and just knowing my own personal experience and knowing that it's not something that is individual to me because of the systems we live in, has been my main commitment, and like deeply rooted in why I do what I do is because of how I grew up and what I know, who I know, etc.
Understandable. I obviously don't know what it feels like to immigrate, to DC, but I can empathize with, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I just know from going to school with you, like I know how it feels to be gaslighted because of how you say things instead of what you're actually saying. So
Mm-hmm.
like people trying to, make things seem bigger than what it is just because you're speaking out about how you feel about a certain thing or how you think, you're not being treated fairly about a particular situation. So I definitely, can empathize with that. And then I appreciate that you never let that, deter you from still speaking out, still trying to make changes and still letting people know that even if a change wasn't made at the moment, that this ain't right. But
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
But far as like assimilating American culture, like how did you go about that?
And so I kind of touch on it to bring in another podcast that I recently did, what radicalized you, and I really got into like my childhood, but truth be told, I did not. Assimilation is a myth. It's a ideology made by like white supremacy, and like even when you think about how we speak about America, right? We say that it's a
Yeah.
melting pot. It means that you have to melt everything that you are, everything that you've brought, and to even blend in allegedly into what is like this country. So think about that, right? And so instead of being like a salad, think about it like a tossed salad, right? You come to this
Yeah.
country, you bring your culture, you bring your language, you bring your love, your passions, etc. No, it's very hard to exist as your true authentic self. And so even in something as simple as my accent, like I remember when I came to this country, I was bullied like crazy for my Trinidadian accent. And so in an effort to like blend in and to be more like my friends, I'm like, okay, I gotta get rid of this. Like I have to learn the slang. I gotta know the things and things like that. And it was really hard. And like also growing up in like a strict household, I was not going to the Star. I was not going to CFE. I was not
Yeah.
on YouTube listening to go-go. I was listening to praise, gospel, like 91.9. Like, so at the beginning of the day, it's a lot of work to have some sort of like self-preservation and staying true to who you are, but also like being accepted in a country that is extremely xenophobic. And so that's no different from being a Black person, right? Even in a predominantly Black city and experiencing life as a Black person, that didn't make it any easier for me as an immigrant to quote unquote assimilate. But there are a lot of things that we align with in like being Black, right? Being a part of the African diaspora. It's not, a lot of things that we have are similar. A lot of experiences that we have are similar. And so not to ostracize or otherize being an immigrant, but also like to flip the lens and say like, how can we be more acceptant of immigrants who are raw in who they are in this country and in their existence, and not having to quote unquote assimilate. Like, you see what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying for
Yeah.
sure.
But I mean, people, and I think that people really love me. Like even you going to high school with me, I don't know if you know I was an immigrant, but like I have never been quiet about my citizenship status, but like only recently have I begun advocacy and being as bold in my story and in my community. And so I think a lot of people appreciate that. Like they're like, girl, we went to elementary school together, we went to high school together. You telling me that this is what the government does to y'all? This is what you have to go through?
Yeah.
But like there are 11 million other people that live this way. And so because of that, like me not being scared to share who I am, but then people being so familiar with me has also made it easier to be in community and just to also stay authentic and true to who I am.
No, I definitely feel that. Like, whenever I see you post about something, like you're literally just like opening my eyes. And I'm saying that as someone as a journalism student, someone that is surrounded by news, even if I don't want to sometimes. Like I have to turn off like Instagram and Twitter, all that, just to like keep my sanity sometimes.
Mm,
But there's so many different things about, immigration, just about, social and political reform that I don't even know about, or I don't know enough about until I look at your post. And like one of the rare people that I'll actually look and I'm like, oh, I need to read all of this. Like I know this is good information and this is going to really expand my mind. So
wow. Thank you.
no problem, no problem. And then as far as like you said with just simulation, like I couldn't have said it any better myself. So when it came to colleges, like what went into, you deciding like how to pick that?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, right? We went to the same high school
Yeah.
and you're a college grad as well. But the thing about it is my process into higher education is 100% different than yours because of my lack of citizenship. And so even with applying to certain schools, a lot of people don't know this, but like undocumented people are banned from certain institutions,
Oh
especially in like
wow.
states like Georgia. Absolutely. And we have like HR 120, which is a bill that allows undocumented students to not only enter higher ed as undocumented students, but also pay in-state tuition. And so that's another issue. So if I were to attend some institutions that I had on my list to go to, I would be classified as an international student simply because of my citizenship
Dang.
status, right? So first things is admission. Like admission is, dang, I might not be accepted. And then if I am accepted, I may be classified. I probably will be accepted as an international student. And then of course you move into like the financial aid portion. So when you apply to FAFSA, first of all, I'm not even like, I don't know the parameters of first gen, but some people identify first gen as the first generation to be born in this country. And so me moving to this country, and not having citizenship, and that being a determining factor of FAFSA, which is like your parent or you tax bracket, and like we're not on the record. So my mother is not granted work authorization, so she has no papers to show from the IRS, right? So I am obsolete when it comes to FAFSA. But then a lot of scholarships that people look at, like I literally, anyone pull up a scholarship right now, Google scholarship and see what the maybe first or second requirement is: legal residence or citizenship. And
Yeah,
so
they do always ask that question on everything. On
why?
everything.
Why?
Everything.
Exactly. And so that made it really frustrating for me. I'm telling you, like the process of like the entire year, because junior year is when they start telling
Yeah.
you for college. So it was really like 2 years of me being absolutely stressed when it came to conversations regarding higher education. And it wasn't a matter of like being a student. Like I was in debate, I was in a book club, I was
Yeah.
all of the things. It wasn't even a matter of rigor. It was really a matter of being exiled, and a lot of requirements being xenophobic. And so I chose UMES, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, as the college that I would go to. Went to orientation, did all the things, and it wasn't until like the last session, intentionally, of course, speaking about like financial aid, and they told me I would have to pay like $25,000 out of pocket. They had nothing for me when it came to like financial aid, because I was not a citizen and because I was not eligible for any scholarships or aid. And so my mother looked at me like, you're not going to be at this college. Sorry. To this
Blame
university.
you. I don't blame you. That's a lot of money. I've never, like, at least in undergrad, I never had to pay that much money for any like 1 year of college.
And
So
that
I
did
can
not
understand
include
that.
housing. And that did
Yeah.
not include, like literally. And so it was really hard for me to grapple with that. And so I was really heartbroken, to be honest. And my mom saw that and she was like, university is free in Trinidad. As much as we like to shame third world countries,
Yeah.
healthcare and education free. Okay. And so she was like, an option for you is to go back home, and to study back home, and pick up all your stuff. Let's go. But of course, like I said, home is here as well. Like this is what I know. And so I did not want to go back home. And so I went back to our guidance counselor. I forget her name now.
Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, or
Yes,
you talking about Ms. Mason? Is one of them.
with a
Ms.
short
Mitchell,
haircut.
they both had short haircuts,
Brown
I think.
skin.
Because Ms. Mitchell did DC cap and tag and like all the college stuff. And then Ms.
Yes,
Mason.
and her office was right next to the auditorium.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, God bless her heart. Like she's the only reason that I had access to higher education. And it wasn't even because she was familiar with what it's like being undocumented and like higher education and citizenship. She was like, UDC is cheap. And even if you are to pay out of pocket, you can pay for UDC. And so I literally applied for UDC while school had already started when I applied to
Dang.
go. Exactly. And so I did late admissions. Still same thing, paying almost $10,000 out of pocket because I was not eligible for a lot of things, but it was extremely manageable for me. And I actually I'm grateful that I chose UDC to be the HBCU that I went to because of the opportunity. Like we have smaller classrooms, it is more affordable, and the same professors that are teaching at Howard are teaching at UDC.
I
Okay. And
didn't know that. That makes sense though. That really makes sense though.
so it's much more depth to my story when it comes to like higher education, but like this is something that was like a positive outcome. Truth of the matter is, a lot of migrant students just say, oh well, like it's not a capability to me, I'm gonna just go try to work, I'm gonna do something else, because it's so hard, and it shouldn't be so hard. And so that was part of the commitments that I had, even accessing higher ed and being there and saying that like I'm a high performing student, I've been here for a couple years now, what can you do for me? And like still my university is like, where it's not much that we can do, work study, because now I have DACA and I could work. But when like I entered higher ed, I was completely undocumented, like without DACA. And so the reasons that I was able to access higher education was because my family sold our home. Like that was the only reason that we had access to
Oh
such a
wow.
large, yes. That's the only way that we could rate, like we can have $8,000 every 6 months is to find like a lump sum of money. But like thinking about that, how are people who are not granted a work authorization to raise money to one, survive, but then much less pay an institution thousands of dollars every month, every couple of months? So when people don't understand like the grand scale of things, don't understand immigration, don't understand how higher ed is like forced to be exclusionary because of our government, because of the just not knowing and not making provisions, is like a lot of reasons that a lot of things continue. But that's what led me into student advocacy, and that's what led me into this job, being a university program coordinator, making sure that students like myself never have to go through a lot of the hoops that I had to.
No, that's definitely understandable. I mean, this is like the perfect I guess you call example of don't judge a book by its cover. Not saying I do that, but I
Oh,
would have never known any of this stuff. You
yeah.
know, you like I said, how people try to labels. Who would have thought, the girl that was on all these different clubs was, not afraid to speak her mind, was at home, like in her real life, like going through all of this. And like
Struggling.
people just assume because you went to UDC, mind you, like I remember my math teacher in like middle school had a master's and was like amazing math teacher. And
Mhm.
you've done like amazing things, but people just assume, you know, oh, like she just went to UDC like just because. Like, no, there's a reason behind everything. And hey, like you're the most, famous person from UDC that I know, like in my personal life. Like, I'm like, oh dang, like Joella, like every
Oh,
time anything that you post, I'm just like, who
thank
would
you.
have thought? Like, who would have thought?
No, UDC has a lot of, I consider UDC in itself to be a hidden gem. Like when it comes to like DC residents, I'm like, all like consider UDC. And a
Yeah.
lot of people who like drop out of Howard come to UDC, but like there are some dynamic people, like even when we think about this movement that's been going on
Mhm.
in relation to the Black Lives Matter and like the DC portion. A lot of people are from UDC leading this
Wow.
fight. A young woman by the name of Sky, another person who goes by Indigo, like we're on the front lines. And so to be honest, I wasn't bragging about going to UDC because as a DC resident, you know that UDC was not it was not glamorized. It was
Yeah. People always
traditional.
talk about the Howard, the GWs, like all
Okay.
these schools that cost way too much money.
Meanwhile, and so in effort to like to be 100% transparent, it wasn't until I was in student leadership and I learned the history of UDC, like learning that we were founded before slavery even ended, for colored women, by a white woman, by Myrtle Minor, and the different evolutions of UDC and how it was a teachers college and making provisions for like so many people. And it's like, because of ignorance, I wasn't proud. And so now that I know, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, let's put all the respect on UDC,
Nah,
but
for sure.
let's also not negate that it wasn't because of our local government, and the lack of investment and the literal
Yeah.
shade from our local government is why UDC is not seen to be the university that it truly is. And so the more that we talk about it, the more that you find more people like me, the more that we learn more about UDC and its placement in DC, is the more that you'll see like more celebration that I think is well deserved when it comes to UDC.
No, I would have to agree. Like just in general, like in college, there's a bunch of hidden gems everywhere, but there's always going to be certain media attention, whether it be because of athletics, endowment, anything in between, why certain universities gain more prestige than others. And this question is pretty loaded, but I really just want to hear your opinion on this. Why do you think there's such a big diversity problem in pretty much every college and university, like in the US?
Wow, LOL, white supremacy. That is the bottom line. White supremacy and capitalism always. And the reasons that we even have HBCUs and is because of the exclusion of Black people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So diversity was
It was literally why they created.
Hello. And I'm not also saying that we don't have to decolonize HBCU, because with that being said, because of that, funding is attached to diversity, right? We had affirmative action that truthfully only benefited white women when you look at it, but like all of these programs were created because it was a problem, like diversity was an issue. And a lot of why we look at like Ivy League institutions and HBCUs or minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving institutions not being in that rank is because we equate prestige to economic status, so socioeconomic status. And so even though we might have some stellar, dynamic, educated, well-rounded leaders coming from certain institutions, that's not the rank. And so I think that we definitely should. I try to balance that, like being proud of your opportunity, like being proud of your opportunities, being proud of your accomplishments, but also acknowledging like this is a matter of access, this is a matter of privilege, this is a matter of oppression that we're able to like be the triumph. And so looking at higher education as a place that should be accessible to everyone, no matter what background, no matter what economic status they have, and it being more like different parameters to measure what we deem as respectable when it comes to higher education is something that I'm also deeply committed to, because some of these institutions are in fact terrible. Like when you look at
I agree.
Reviews, like so I think that while we consider like the next generation, because we're getting a little older, like our generation has babies and they're on the way, and they're unfortunately having to save up because college is going to be $1 million by the time we have children.
You're probably right. You're probably right.
Hello. And the reasons that we equate like sports to the reasons that a lot of diversity is included in institutions. And we can parallel sports and slavery and how they deem Black people. That's another conversation for another day. But unfortunately, you have Black students going into predominantly white institutions thinking that like, wow, I made it, or wow, this is really going to be it, and really suffering psychologically, which then impacts their grades, impacts their matriculation, impacts persistence. And so we actually need to stop encouraging people to go to these institutions that are historically racist, historically problematic, and really encourage Black students to either be amongst other minority or just like equip themselves to know that, hey, when you enter this world, this is what it'll be like. And a lot of people parallel PWIs to the quote unquote real world. And why are you comfortable with that? Like, why would you trade an experience where I'm learning my history, I'm swag surfing, I'm doing the thing. And the excuse being, well, this is more like the real world. I'm happy that I experienced this like earlier in college. Like, no, let's shape institutions to be actually accepted. Like not just application says, I got accepted to this university, but will you truly be accepted at that university? You ask that before you go there. And then we'll see, growth and diversity. And like, maybe students, and I definitely agree that there should be shared responsibility when it comes to transforming higher education. It shouldn't just be the jobs of students to make a university more inclusive and more diverse. You actually can hire people in this moment that are trained. Hello, like UDC has a Center of Diversity, Inclusion, and Multicultural Affairs. Okay, like people are one person, let's be clear, no shade UDC, one person is committed to creating that space of acceptance, creating that space of inclusion. And so if you have these certain kinds of students, and if you're okay with taking their tuition, taking their dollars every semester, where's the bilateral acceptance?
No, I definitely can feel you in that one. That I ain't gonna lie, that hit me home because as someone that went to two PWIs, like two super huge PWIs,
Mhm.
and I'm not gonna lie, my thinking when I first left DC is like being used to being in a space where, you know, pretty much everyone was black. Like I can't name that many white kids that actually went to McKinley Tech, if we being
Exactly.
honest. So I just felt like I needed to be an experience where, you know, I got used to, like you said, these people that essentially run how everything was set up. Now
Mm,
I get now what you're saying, like, maybe I should have like took the more holistic approach to that. But like I just know at the time at 18, I was like, well, I already know how to, you know, deal with black people because I'm black and my whole experience has been black, you know, being in DC. But I just feel like I needed to learn them. And in reality, it really didn't take much work because as a person, like I'm naturally, you know, inclusive and I get along well with people.
yes.
But, you know, I would have never thought that, you know, until after I went through that experience. And I was like, this really ain't that complicated. It's like not that much different. But I definitely, you know, feel what you're saying. And I know you talked about, you know, hiring people to do that. Is there
Mhm.
any other ways that you think that we can make these places more inclusive?
Absolutely. I think prevention is better than cure. Okay.
Mm.
If we let people know upfront, like, and by people I mean students, I mean children, young people, know upfront what they're going to deal with, and preparing them for such a situation and not encouraging them to go to these certain schools, then I think that will help prepare you mentally, or for even like knowing that, yeah, I still want to go to this university. But then also like just honoring people's experience, sharing more stories, like really being intentional about learning the kinds of people that you're in relationship with. Because truth be told, you would have the same diversity that going to a black school, because black people are inherently diverse. We're not a monolith. So you would probably, and also HBCUs are also very diverse. Like we accept everyone because we are the reasons that HBCU was created was to
Yeah,
adhere, like literally the underserved and those who
yeah.
are not being served. So just dispelling the personal misconceptions behind like, oh, I have to be in this specific space and to do this thing, is like you, but like let's also not be confused that these are things that are not individualistic. Like these are systems that
Mhm.
exist, that continue to have us thinking that, like, first of all, higher education in itself, and I know this is a podcast that talks about colleges,
Yeah,
but I know people that are not college graduates, did not go to
yeah.
college, and are extremely pleasant and pleased when it comes to how their life turned out and how things go. And so like not shaming people for
No,
that.
I agree. I agree. Like college isn't for everyone. And like if you know that what you want to get out of life doesn't need college, then why go? All you're doing is wasting your money, your time, your mental health, your, you know, emotional health, because college is it's just it just can be stressful. There's just
Mm,
point blank period. Like and it takes a certain level of mental toughness and just wanting to get across that finish line in order to get across that finish line. Because if you
exactly.
don't, like, you're really just, you know, shooting yourself in the foot, you know, so to speak. And then
Exactly.
also, I mean, we haven't talked about this, but this is something that has never been a myth. Standardized tests in general,
Mm,
like I don't even know why they exist. They serve no purpose. They don't show anything far as, you know, your level of intellect at all. And I feel like there's other ways to measure intellect and see who's a good fit for your school without using standardized tests
okay.
because they're essentially created for the people that have all the resources to the test that they created.
Mm, you are saying
Like I'm just being honest because my SAT score was awful. My GRE score was awful. Like I'm gonna be honest, like I didn't even do any GRE prep like that year that I took it. I did it like previously in the past, but I was like, I'm a journalism student. They're going to accept me if they want to accept me. I'm going to just take this test, scheduled it, took it, sent them the score, and I still got into ASU, which is, if not the best, one of the best journalism schools in the country. So they saw, what I already knew about myself, in that this test is just a test. That's
Exactly. It's really a matter of like are you able to retain information? And I mean, we can talk about the education system as a whole and how it reflects the prison system and how it does not make way for those who are like mentally unable to process information in the same ways that this specific paper says that I have to. Like, if I do things the wrong way, or if I type something the wrong way, that the answer is automatically wrong, even though I came to the right answer a different way. Like, things like that are extremely strategic to keep certain people out. And it's really unfortunate. Like, I'm very much honest. Like, I passed the AP test, like I got the credits, and I've always been in honors classes, but I was never one of those people that was like, oh, I'm in a smart group. Oh, I'm like, we should never be proud of leaving people out. And that's essentially what this system is. Like, they glorify those who can reinforce that what they're doing is correct, instead of just like helping those, or just like accommodating or meeting those who learn differently, who might need a little bit more help. And that is okay. Like, you're not special. There's no special needs. Like, those are the needs and they should be met. Why are they special? Because that's the system that we live in. And so you're absolutely correct. Like, there's a lot of things that we could talk about, even in like higher education, and just like standard education, the scheduling that they have. Like, you have to work on one lesson in one day, and then you move on to the next lesson the next day. Like, you want me to learn a completely different thought that I've never seen before, right? You want me to do classwork, do homework on this new thought that you only went over for a couple of hours, and then we move on to something else. Like, nothing is realistic. And I understand now, like, we're moving from a robot age, and it's probably only worse for these children that are growing up now, in addition to being in a pandemic and everything. Like, you have to sit behind a computer and go through the same things that we went through, that at least we could get up and go to the bathroom. We were stressed. Like, at least we had music and art. Like, at least we had some fun interjected. But like, sorry to these kids in this moment. And so, like, as we are, like, I'm someone who's definitely strong on education, but like, people are growing up now, people are experiencing the world now. And so what can we do that immediately changes a lot of the things that we went through less than 10 years ago? And that's like one of my commitments, one of my questions. And it might come from like the political stance of like passing bills and looking at higher education, but like, what are social ways that we can help students and make sure our students are taken care of in this moment? Because this is stress. Like, this is stressful. For real.
No, I would definitely agree. Like, it's just like you said, like, for example, my sister, she's 12, like, she is going through Zoom school right now in the 6th grade. So it's like, she will call me up and be like, hey, do you know this problem? Or like, can you help me with my homework? And I'm like, I wish it was a situation where we could, stay at the class and ask the teacher for help, or you could ask a friend for help. Like, obviously, I think yesterday she told me she had asked like the teaching assistant or something like that. But back when we were in school, like, there wasn't a teaching assistant. Like, you just straight up just asked your teacher for help, and like they gave you help. So it's just weird, like, everything that people, are adapting to right now.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And I think that we don't center the children enough. And this is, of course, because of ageism. And we have to speak for children, and they don't know what they want. But like, I don't see any floors other than like a few people who may sign up for town halls talking about like SROs or talking about things that they don't like in their university. But like, there's no space right now for students to share all of these things. And I know that during our age, it was just written off as mental health. Like, it was just like, oh, you have ADD. Oh, you have all these things. Oh, it's not you. But in reality, like, could you imagine? Like, that's literally what we're saying. Like, could you imagine? And so it's really unfortunate. Like, students like your sister, we had aftercare. We had another.
It's true.
We had aftercare. Like, I'm struggling through my homework. Somebody who might be even 20, 21 volunteering to like come and help us. But like, are we creating that community when like the world is saying that community is something that is shunned right now? Are we making sure that these children are okay? Because these are the doctors, these are the lawyers, these are the singers, these are the everything that is to be in this next generation. Are we caring for our future by caring for them? And that's the main point. Like, and it shouldn't be from a matter of like, I want to make sure that you become a doctor, so I'm going to make sure that you're doing your work.
Yeah.
Like, no, I want to make sure that you're following your passions and you're enjoying this experience, so that you don't have to heal from your childhood and your virtual school 10 years from now in somebody's office. And so that's like the main issue. And hopefully, like, a lot of students choose college, but I know a lot of people that are dropping out like at exponential rates right now from
Yeah.
college. And some people who are like, I took a year off and I'm so happy that I did, like
Yeah.
perfect time. And so college is not appealing right now. College is not sexy right now. And
It's
so
not.
what are we doing to change the environment? And I know I'm doing that work, but I'm encouraging like everyone who's listening, like even if your work is not in higher education or education at all, but like leaning into anyone who's like currently a student in this moment is like one of the ways that we could solve that.
No, I agree. And like you said, I think just in general in life, I think it's been it's improving, but they're essentially they're sectioning off people and saying, hey, this is the profession that you should get into, et cetera, when like it shouldn't be like that. I think people they grow up and because our parents thought this way, like in 80s, 90s, however, like you have this traditional way of thinking that is created where, you work until you get retirement and then you get your pension and then that's the end of it. But that's not how our world looks. That's not how people think. And those traditional, ways of thinking just really don't fit how the world is working. So,
Exactly.
like you said, if you want to sing, if you want to teach, whatever the case is, follow your passion, as well as the fact that I just think in general that people aren't realizing just how important it is to, like you said, look at these students and see, they need help and they're not getting the same help that we would have because everything, is virtual as well.
Absolutely. And you really touched on a point that's really important about like the careers and this whole system of careers that the former generation before us had of like you're a carpenter for your entire life and you wait for that social security number. But like this generation, first of all, we're creating jobs. Like you think about the entire tech industry did not exist 20 years ago. And so in addition to like tech, there are so many professions. Like the job that I have now is something that is completely new. So we're living in an age where you can create the job that you want. But like, what does that mean for higher education? That's also very intimidating because like when you think about reliance on the system, I can literally go to YouTube and pull up a Khan's Academy or like anyone on the
Yeah.
internet as opposed to a professor who's going to teach this for like 6 months. And so it's a threat to higher ed, as well as like a lot of professions. Accountants are being replaced by neat books. Like literally, I just need a computer and a receipt that isn't faded, and then boom, I don't need an accountant. So it's like we also have to be extremely real with the world that we're living in, and it's continuously evolving. Making sure that higher education is always at the edge of that curve or like ahead of the curve is something that I don't think that we're doing a good job of. Being someone who's recently like exiting higher education. So that's another thing to these students about like, you might want to be a firefighter when you was 10, okay? But now you see that, whoa, my uncle is a what? And how do I get there? And
Yeah.
so like really leaning into mentorship, like even if you are in a specific profession and you don't think that you're so much bang or you don't think that you're all that, you'll be surprised who's admiring you or like who could learn from you. And so that's why I also really preach mentorship. And so in being a mentor, that means that you also have to be accountable to like who you are. So it's mutual gain. So like if you're someone who's a recent graduate or you have an unorthodox path when it comes to your profession, share that. Like grab somebody up and choose them to be under your wing or whatever. That's the only ways that we're going to see the world that we envision.
No, I agree. Like, as far as unorthodox, everything about my life is unorthodox. I went from, you know, having a YouTube show in high school and wanting to be on ESPN to, thinking, okay, I'm gonna just work for a regular sports network to one of my own sports show to being an author. So it's
Wow.
like nothing was linear about that at all. And how you
Right.
said that they need to evolve education just on all fronts everywhere because it doesn't match the level of evolution in technology or everything else going on. But one
Yes.
thing that they do is make sure that the inflation rate of college
Oh,
tuition is
that's right.
higher than the inflation rate of everything else that's being priced in the country, which I think is
Mhm.
crazy.
It makes no sense. And we can get into capitalism on a different day, but like it's like them raising rent and nothing has changed about my building. I have been living here for 25 years, and when I first got here, it was maybe 250. Now I'm at 700 because of gentrification, property tax, you
Yeah,
name it. Right? Nothing has changed. Like we're literally using the same books that another generation was using, but tuition is skyrocketing. Like
yeah,
literally because of COVID, despite not having to make like in-person provisions, universities are justifying raising tuitions, saying that like, oh, we have to train professors to be more tech savvy, or we have to make sure
yeah,
that we have to up our like. It doesn't make sense, to be honest. And on your point about being unorthodox, like literally no one. I could tell you my entire path. Like mine was not linear as well, even the amount of years that it takes you to graduate, that like the average is 6, but they preach 4 years and
yeah,
out, right? But like when you look at that and you understand that like nothing is linear, like nothing about our personhood is linear because we don't exist as like on the books, like everything is contingent. And so you shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like you shouldn't be ashamed of, you should be proud that like, whoa, I went to all these different industries, I stepped in all these different paths, I had all these different passions, and all of those led me still to this moment. Because I'm sure that you grabbed tools or you learned some things in this specific department that helped you now. Like with being in mass media and doing an entire package by myself, I now know like when I'm
yeah,
doing these presentations, I want a camera person at this angle.
yeah.
I want
That's
I
true.
want
That's true.
subtitles. Like it's all a matter of like learning. And so never be ashamed of the path that you've taken. Never be ashamed of the path that you're on, because it's all leading you to like the place that you want to be. And if you don't know where that is right now, that's fine. That's another idea of capitalism. Like I'm
Yeah, that you need
13
to know
years
what
old.
you need to do, like at every step of the way. Like I
That's not
figured
real.
out what I'm gonna do. Like sometimes just in the moment. Like even if
Period.
you schedule something, like things are gonna go off schedule. Like you got to figure out like how to pivot from that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's like you can think about what you cared about, what your passions were maybe 5 years ago. Like maybe I enjoyed writing, maybe I enjoyed drawing. Now I don't, and that's
Yeah,
fine. Like you can change your jobs, you can change your majors when you get to college. Like literally, I know somebody that changed their major 3.5 years into their degree program and was happy, and
yeah,
that's no problem. Like that's really what you have to do, is like really trust yourself and not be gaslit into like something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. You navigate, you learn, you build connections, and you move accordingly. That's really it.
yeah. No, like people too often try to demonize change. Like
Mm,
changing your mind just means that you're processing new information well. Like if you are, changing your mind, like you one are having the conviction to do it, and two, you're
mm,
having enough wherewithal about yourself to say, "Oh wow, like it's okay that I think differently about something instead of being stuck with your ways and saying
yes,
that, oh, I'm gonna think about something the same way." Well, we're going
yes.
to slightly pivot. I want to talk a little bit, about your organization, Migration Matters. How did you go about starting that?
Yeah, so Migration Matters was founded in 2019, and it was really from the inspiration of Trinice McNally, who is the founder of the Center of Diversity, Inclusion, and Multicultural Affairs. And I was sharing my story at the first Unafraid rally that we had at our university, just like sharing that there are undocumented students on campus coming out of the shadows, being unapologetic in who we are in our stories, and hoping that our university would make provision. But of course, systems of power did not happen, did not work. And so like finding a different way, Miss Trinice was like, Trinice, because we in the same age range, but I'm Caribbean, so everybody's Miss. Trinice really helped me understand that like you don't have to fall into the shadows of doing this work by yourself. Like you can absolutely build a community and alliance. And so this was also recently after the Latinx Association was founded, and I'm Afro-Caribbean. Like I am not Latinx. I'm a member, I'm an ally, but like I was the only openly undocumented Black person, and I felt very ostracized. I felt like, even though this is my community, this is not my community that I should be building with in this understanding. And so because of that, I teamed up with the founder of the Latinx Association and had Ms. Trinice as my mentor and advisor when it came to founding Migration Matters, wrote the Constitution, found our founding members, did all the things that the university required to become an organization. And that include like defining our purpose, making our mission statement. The reasons that it's named Migration Matters is to like pay ode and respect to the Black Lives Matter, like Black Lives Matter, and immigration is a Black issue. So I was like, immigration matters, like absolutely.
Yeah, it does.
Things are important. And like Audre Lorde said, we don't live single issued lives. And so unfortunately, a lot of information is not circulating immigration. And if it is, it's not on Black people, it's not on us. And that's all intentional. And so in respect to like building alliance with those who are not immigrants but want to learn more about immigration, building political education, understanding how certain things work, because immigration is really a federal fight. Even though cities and states can be sanctuary cities, a lot of the regulations is from our national government. And so helping students like understand that the first event that I held, because it was a one-woman show for a really long time, was what is ICE, what is DACA, TPS, and DED. And so that was like the first event. And I was so happy with the turnout and the amount of people that came that was willing to learn about ICE, CBP, the budget, the different categories of status. And so understanding that like student leaders can absolutely be empowered to make the change that they want to see on campus. I don't want the entire responsibility of higher education to be changed by students, but like you interface with the university every single day. You know the culture and you know the environment. And if you want to shift that, you can. And that's bottom line. And so Migration Matters is the first and only organization at a HBCU to center undocumented students and to lean focus on international students, those with other traditional and non-traditional backgrounds, immigration backgrounds. But like I've worked with DSU, I've held a panel with DSU. I know that a lot of international students are currently at HBCUs. And so making higher education more accessible and just like the culture and environment as well as policies, because it's not just about having CSA host a fire party with a bomb playlist. Like
That's true. That's true.
Like it's not what it's about. Like I want to make sure that when I go to the scholarship page, I don't have to cry in my advisor's office and try to find these scholarships, spend hours and hours finding these scholarships on my own. My university knows that one, I exist, and two, they've made provisions on their scholarship page for me. And I have housing, right? Access to housing is completely contingent. And then when you think about like conversion costs, $100 is $1 American dollar. And you think about like the thousands of dollars that a Jamaican student, because our university was 20% international students, which is high on any.
Yeah, that's super high.
And our number one population was Jamaican students. And so when you think about that, all of the socioeconomic, all of the things that's going on in addition to like the global world that we live in as a Black person, and that the only like resource is your university in this country, right? Because I'm undocumented, but I did a lot of research on like international students, the amount of the billions of dollars they've contributed, and it's just like the lack of care that they have. And then like if you are to speak up or if you are to get a job under the table, you are expelled from this country, like you're canceled. And so even though it's not your experience, and that's something that I preach at the end of everything, is that like, even though this is not your experience, you don't have to be directly impacted to care about the impact. And like literally, if it's something that, yeah, absolutely. Like, and I know that the system that we live in is like me, myself, and I, like, I have to make sure that I survive. My family is good. But like, what world is that? Like, what world would that be if everyone was just like reliant on themselves? Like, first of all, it's not real. Cause like, you didn't get there by yourself. Like someone helped you, someone cared about you, someone cared about what was going on with you. So like, why not extend that care to like other marginalized groups who are experiencing worse and can't say anything. So that is something that like Migration Matters is still committed to. We've done virtual programming. We recently are also committed to like serving Washington, D.C. We gave out 100 gifts in partnership with the Live movement.
Wow.
Yes, to children in Washington, D.C., specifically Southeast, in wards 5, 7, and 8. And so we understand that our placement is still in Washington, D.C. We still care about our community because this is where we live. Like these are residents. But also it's really important that we still like center the conversations around what's going on in immigration, because we're coming out of a Trump era that was extremely problematic, xenophobic. Like they literally tried to kick out international students while the borders were closed. Like they tried to deport students while the borders were closed. And so understanding that, you know, even though we're in a Democratic administration, Democrats have also waged war on immigrants. Understanding political education, understanding resources, mutual aid, all of those things are things that we're still committed to, because I'm now just the advisor. So I have 2 co-presidents who are international students from Jamaica leading the organization right now. But like, I personally want to like branch out. I want to build scholarships because I don't want to wait for institutions to create. I want to be able to create. So that's what I'm working on. So while I don't have it right now, but when I do, I'm gonna send it to you so that people could donate to get some.
That. Sounds like a plan. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like you said, we got to be the change that we want to see in the world. So instead of waiting for your seat at the table, like you just go ahead and take it. Like there's a seat open somewhere, even if you don't see it. You just got to sit there. Like you can't wait.
And that's another thing, because it's crazy, because I literally was telling, I don't know, what's the time? I don't remember what your time limit was, but I literally was telling somebody just before this that they're preaching to us strategically, like, oh, try to get a seat at the table. That table should not exist. And a lot of people say like, oh, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I don't want a table to exist. Like, I don't want to have to grab a seat. I don't want to have to fight for a plate. I don't want to have to pull out a menu on my phone. I want to get seeds so that I can sit and eat with whoever I so please. Like, we don't want the autonomy to be chosen of whoever brings me to the table. Who's bringing me to the table anyway? Like, literally. And a lot of resources are kept when in reality, resources in this world is unlimited. Like, not really, because we're dying and the world is evaporating and no one cares about global warming. But like in real life, if we really took care of our communities and we really lived a sustainable life, we don't have to fight. Like, we wouldn't have to fight. And so as much as we're trying to be like accepted, like acceptance should never be the end all be all. Like a seat at the table, respectability, like all of the things should not be the end all be all. Even going to college, if the reason that you're going to college is because you need to make more than $10 minimum wage, that's a problem. Like, and so getting to the root of that problem, it wouldn't be, let me not just go to college. It would be, why is minimum wage so low? Why do I have to dedicate at least 4 to 5 to 6 years of my life to make $2 extra on my paycheck every hour? It makes no sense. And so the more you know, as they say, ignorance is bliss. The more you know, the stressed you are when it comes to like,
oh my God.
But how could you change it if you don't know what's going on? Like somebody, Lord, I feel bad for not remember her name, but she said, if you don't speak out about the injustices, they're going to kill you and say that you liked it. Like, they're going to say that you did not have a problem. And so there's a lot wrong with the world right now. Like, there's absolutely a lot wrong with the world, but we are changing a lot as well. Like, and so as much as we are morphing when it comes to the issues that are going on, they're going to continue to build problems and they're going to continue to build barriers. And so just always being ahead and aware and just on your toes and on your feet, being committed to yourself, knowing exactly what you want and who you are, that is the only way that we're all going to survive what is known as this world today, because whew, for real.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And as someone who lives in Phoenix, that is a byproduct of global warming at its finest, because 118 should never exist as a temperature. Yikes. I definitely understand that. Now, before we wind this down, I got one more question for you. How do you go about picking organizations that you want to work with?
In terms of job or like volunteer or
I guess a combination of both.
okay. So when I first joined like the movement, it was the first organization that I was a part of was United We Dream. And that is a local, well, they're a national organization, but there was a United We Dream DMV chapter. And it's a youth-led, the largest youth-led organization, immigrant-led organization in the country. And so that's where I learned a lot of the organizing skills that I have, in addition to another program called Bold, in addition to being in Undocumented Black, in addition to being in at the NAA, like all of the things that I've joined in over the years have been like something that aligns with me and something that I also want to contribute to. So like, yes, these group of people I merge, like the identities that we have are adjacent or like something. But then also like looking ahead, there's something that I can gain from this. There's more that I can become by being a part of this. And so that also is the crucible for how I move with Migration Matters. Like I don't want just these students to do these trainings that I have set out like for them. Like what are ways that I can make sure that I'm investing in them in the same ways that they're investing in me? And so I always encourage people to join a collective. Like you can move alone, like you can, like coming from someone who's extremely independent, but it's exhausting. Like it's exhausting and you do not learn as much. And why rebuild the wheel when you could just like help someone else turn their, like literally help steer the wheel of a car that already exists. And so that's really the motive that I have. Is like, no, I'm not the first person to do any of this. I'm not the first person to feed the homeless. I'm not the first person to work on immigration. I'm not the first Black undocumented person in this country. And so learning from the expertise of people who already exist and then building myself to also be able to pour back into people in my organization is something that I'm committed to. So I think that could be like the ways that people maneuver, like picking an organization, because that's like how I've done so as well. But also like not being afraid to join an organization that you don't necessarily identify with, or like you don't necessarily understand, and that being from a place of curiosity and respect, because you could also be really harmful joining that space and like contributing and speaking and being completely ignorant and it be offensive. So like understanding your privilege and your position in the work that that organization is committed to, and then also just like join in. That's it.
All right. Okay, we got one last thing on tap before I cue us out.
Okay.
I play a game with every guest I have on here. And the game I have for you is a classic. It's called Welcome to the Dinner Table. If you could pick any 5, activists, people that just make social change, if you could pick 5 of them, dead or alive, who would you have dinner with?
Wow.
Yeah.
I would choose Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. I would choose Harriet Tubman, of course, a Maryland legend. I would choose Ayanna Pressley, because she's like a politician that is like still the most left, like socially aware and things like that. So I'm like, how do you navigate working in a system like this? So I would choose her. Who would I choose? I would choose Zora Neale Hurston. I really enjoy Zora Neale Hurston's mind and just like creative mindset of an approach to like being a historian and being like a wordsmith and things like that. Let me think of somebody else. Who was that, 4?
That's 4.
Wow, this is a big one.
Yeah, this is a big one.
I would have to say Jesus Christ. And I'm not trying to be funny. I am not trying to be funny, but this man died, like literally was persecuted by the same people that he was trying to serve. And it's like, you can literally be the perfect person and still these people will like not be grateful. They still will hate you. Like, how do you navigate this world? That's for personal development. That's for like, how did you do it, JC? So I would have all of those people at the table, and I probably would not eat because I would just be so in tune with what they are
taking notes. I don't blame you.
So that's my table. Mhm.
That's a amazing fact. That's a lot of knowledge that's gonna be dripped for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you some slack because you picked Jesus Christ, but I almost thought you was gonna pick MLK. But
Mm.
hey, there's so many people to pick from. Like, so it was gonna be hard either way.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
not gonna lie.
I have a lot of like Claudia Jones. There's a lot of faves that I have that I honor, and there are a lot of people that I honor that are alive still to this day. But it's just like understanding like who I want to be and like certain lessons that I'm still struggling to learn.
Mhm.
That's another thing, because like I want to strengthen my strengths, but I also want to be intentional about like not living in my weaknesses. And so those were the reasons that I chose those people. But like if we had a long table, like give me a Thanksgiving table next time.
I'm gonna create that game. I'm gonna have to put that one on tap. The Thanksgiving dinner table.
Yes.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I'm not gonna lie. All right.
Thank you so much.
That's all we have on this week's episode of the Jack of All Trades pod. Make sure you check out the next episode on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcast. Subscribe to my Inside 380 YouTube channel where I post the full episodes as well. Also, get you my book, Jack of All Trades, Rise of a Party Promoter. Amazon, Kobo, wherever you can find the book, just Google it. You'll be able to find it.
An author.
And follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Jack Onovan. I'll have Joella's social media info in the bio as well. LA out.
Thank you.